Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Gnomon live stream for tonight's event, From Gnomon Student to Industry Veteran with Tefft Smith. My name is Adam Hartel. I'm a recruiter here at Gnomon, and tonight I have the honor of introducing our fantastic guest to you, and I'm really excited for this evening's stream. But before I introduce him, I'd like to thank Lenovo for sponsoring this event. Lenovo helps us at Gnomon continue to bring free educational offerings like tonight's stream to you. So big thanks to them. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our guest for the evening. Tefft Smith is a visualization, VFX, and animation supervisor working mostly in films, television, commercials, and themed entertainment. His work experience has introduced working for various studios, including Pixamondo, Howlin Entertainment, A52, Look Effects Incorporated, Zoic Studios, and Gradient Effects. He has recently founded his own studio, Opsis, in collaboration with two other longtime fellow VFX professionals. Tefft has several credits to his name, including The Mandalorian, Star Trek Short Treks, Midway, Orville Season 2, The OA, Goosebumps, Slappy's Halloween, X-Men, Dark Phoenix, A Dog's Way Home, and Kong Skull Island and Tomorrowland. Over the years, he has taught at USC and at Gnomon, where he served as the Director of Education in 2008. So with that, guys, I want to welcome our guest, Tefft. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having me, Adam. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for allowing me to kind of go back on memory lane and talk about 20 years of experience.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure.
So basically, my talk tonight is going to be broken up into two parts. One is wanted to go through my history as far as an artist, as a working professional, and mostly why I chose Gnomon, how I got to Gnomon, and then what I've done since being at Gnomon. One of the main things has been, as a kid. As a kid, you start to figure out what it is that you want to do. So for me, I very quickly started to dress up as characters. And now this is back, just to date myself, back in the 70s. So, there weren't too many costumes that you went through. So you kind of had to make your own. My mom helped a lot, and we would, create Batman. And then, I saw Clash of the Titans and decided to take a baseball bat and add some tape and some cowboy boots and a sheet from my bed and become Perseus. That then basically started to bring me up to, all right, well, I like to be creative. I like to imagine. And I love the freedom that my family allowed me to just kind of explore. Early on, I was introduced to films, and just as you guys probably have all come up in different times, the films that resonated with me early on were these films right here. So you gotta love Batman. And two of the things I loved about Batman was I really loved the graphical sense of the pow, bang, and everything with that. So the graphical ads of this on all the cartoons. Then I saw Clash of the Titans, which was, introduction to Ray Harryhausen, which later became a huge inspiration to me and an influence to me. Obviously, I have to put the classics in there. Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. This is the first film my dad took me to as a kid and fell in love. And then, we're all inspired by. So then where do you go from there? Well, started early. I started drawing and figuring out stories and taking action figures. And you can see from my wonderful drawings, from when I was, 5 all the way up until I was 8, I'm like, okay, this is how you become an artist. I'm going to, be this most famous artist. I'm going to have my career in art. I am going to become, Leonardo da Vinci, Pablo, Dr. Seuss. At this time in my life, it was the 80s. So Nagel was a huge inspiration to me. And then I was a giant Turtles fan. And, so this is how I thought my life was going to progress. When I think I was 13 or 14, my sister was living in San Francisco, and I went out to San Francisco, and she took me down to the wharf, and we were wandering the streets, and I saw these amazing artists just working on the streets and doing portraits and doing these amazing renderings of people that were just walking by for not a lot of money, and I realized that I will never even be this good as an artist or as a painter. And so my mindset switched very early on to like, okay, well, I'm not going to go into art. I'm going to go into business. And growing up, my father put a tennis racket in my hand when I was 2 years old and trained me over and over again over years to play tennis to the best of my capabilities. Early on, I was highly skilled, and I got accepted to go to Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy in Florida. And while I was there, I would still draw and stuff. And one of the directors of the school noticed that I had this ability to capture, some, ideas, but I had a graphical sense. My lines were, thicker, and I did some more, clean designs and stuff like that. And so they were like, well, we need a nice friendly handout for the players and for the students to do stretches and good form for lifting weights. Would you be willing to do kind of like a handbook? So this was my introduction to what is graphic design. And so I left graphic design. I came back from Bollettieri, full blown, want to play tennis. I'm going to use tennis to get into, a top school, get a sponsorship. I mean, this is back in the 90s, so there is no internet, there's no nothing. The only way that you get recruited is by being scouted or winning nationals or state or anything like that. And so one of the things that happened was I was also being introduced to graphic design classes and typesetting and logo design, business cards, brochures and stuff like that, silk screening. And while I was training for my senior year of tennis, most likely to take state and go to nationals, I fractured my ankle. And then a couple weeks after that, I was diagnosed with diabetes. And pretty much that took me out of the season, and I was not allowed to finish my tennis career in school. Hence taking me out of, any type of recruitment or scouting or anything like that. And I was bummed. I was kind of sad. And a friend of mine, or actually it was a friend of my dad's, who had a company. It was a stereo company in Chicago. He basically needed a logo for his company. And my dad was just like, well, my son can draw. And, obviously it's every parent is like, oh, my son's the greatest. And, we can do everything. And, there's some truth, never to that, but there's always, the encouragement. And so Al basically reached out and said, hey, could you do this? And I did a sketch on paper, and then he's like, okay, well, can you clean it up? And so since I was missing out on 3-4 hours of tennis every day, I decided, all right, I'm going to start to learn how to do computer art. And so I got a copy of Illustrator, which I think it was like Illustrator 2.0 and Photoshop 2.5. No, it was Photoshop 3 because it had layers. And I basically started to teach myself how to create logos. And I successfully created a really eye-catching logo. At the time, again, everything that I'm doing is pretty much going to be a self, it's just going to be, I'm going to be making fun of myself by showing you all this old art, and you guys can all have some fun with it. But I started a company in high school called TS Design. And one of the things I did was I did a lot of brochures and logo designs for local companies within the Chicagoland area, but then it expanded out to Michigan and Detroit. And so I kind of had like a little niche in Indiana, and I had a little, clientele of about 30 people that were coming back to me for, graphic design, logos, mostly brochure work. But as you can see, I mean, these are very dated, very not to my standards today. But back then, people paid me to do this. And I very quickly realized I can actually make a living doing art. So I started to look into art schools. And at the time, the other contributing factor is that I was introduced to After Effects. And I'm like, oh, wait, I can take these graphics and make them move? What? And Jurassic Park and Toy Story were just coming out at that time. And I'm like, there's 3D, there's animation. What is this animation? So I started to look around at art schools again back in, this is like 94, 95. And there was only, I think at the time, 3 schools in the United States that had had 3D animation. One was RISD in Florida. The other one was Savannah did not. Cal Arts was starting to, but RISD, Minneapolis School of Art and Design, and I think it was SCAD. I think it was Savannah. And, and I have a huge love for Prince. And I was like, well, I'm inspired by him. He lives in Minneapolis. Let's go to Minneapolis. And so I basically went to Minneapolis to get a degree in animation and photography and graphic design. And while I was there, I learned Lightwave. My first 3D package that I ever learned was Strata 3D. Actually, no, my first was Infinity. Next was Strata, and then I went up to Lightwave. And this was my first 3D animation. It wasn't my first 3D animation, but this is definitely my first piece that I was proud of that I did in '97 out of MCAD. That is done in Lightwave.
Cheese. Just died.
So that happened, and I look back at that, and I'm like, why did I have her in blue hair and a blue shiny dress? But that was my choice. I was 20 years old. But yeah, so that's what I did with MCAD, and the one thing about it was, that was almost two and a half years of learning Lightwave. And it was very crude. It was, it had the story. And that was the main thing that I think was the most important thing is that it was my introduction to storytelling and to understanding edits and editing and flow and stuff like that. And it was also, in my opinion, a successful animated piece for back in the late 90s. So I'm coming to my last year of art school, and it's right now it's 1998, and it's the winter break. So it's 98 to 99, and I was going to Las Vegas for a Prince concert, celebrating the turn of 1999 because it's his iconic song. And so I was in Las Vegas for an event with him, and my dad was suggesting, he's like, you know what you should do? You have half a year left. He's like, why don't we go to Los Angeles over the 2 week, or it was a 3 week break after your Prince thing? Why don't you go to Los Angeles and start reaching out to studios, not asking them for a job, but why don't you ask them, what is it that you need to do for the next 6 months to come back and successfully apply for a studio like yours? And so at the time, of course, 19 or 21 years old, I was just like, oh, Dad, okay, fine. Let's go hang out in Los Angeles. That would be great. So he and I went out and had an amazing time. And he really helped kind of, get me around. And we reached out to every studios. And again, this is back with no internet, no email. There was internet per se, AOL and dial-up, but nothing like today. So it was just cold calling and trying to reach out to people. And so I went to Sony, and I went to DreamWorks. And luckily, when I went to Disney, I had met someone by the name of Dan Lund, who was a graduate from MCAD. And he showed me, actually, it wasn't at Disney, it was Warner Brothers, and he showed me something I will never forget. Actually, no, I take that back. Dan Lund, was at Disney, and he was an effects artist, and he was doing, traditional hand-drawn digital effects, like bubbles and smoke and stuff like that. But he was telling me, he's like, well, there really isn't that many, there aren't really that many places that are using Lightwave. He's like, there's a couple studios out there. He's like, but you know what? Why don't you? There's a friend of mine who you should go see at Warner Brothers. Talk to him, because he's doing something that's really cool. And there's a new. He's like, I forget what it's called. He's like, go talk to him, and I'll set it up for you, and just go check it out. I'm like, all right, perfect. So I go to Warner Brothers, and I sit down, and I see something that I will never forget. And it was early test animation of one of the greatest animated films ever, which is Iron Giant. And I saw how he was doing the light reveals of how he was doing comp tricks and stuff like that. But the most impressive thing that I saw was two things: the introduction to Maya, and then how they were using Maya because at the time the rendering couldn't hold up. So what they were doing is that they were screen grabbing, print screening, kind of like what they did with young Sherlock Holmes and early, Star Wars and stuff like that. They're screen grabbing or doing play blasts, basically cells for the traditional animators to draw over. So they're doing the Iron Giant in 3D, but then they're doing paint overs to give it the 2D feel. But to see this program called Maya was like, what? And I asked him the same question. I'm like, so what is this? What is this Maya? And actually, what is anyone use Lightwave these days? And very quickly, he was just like, no, he's like, no, there's a studio over called Band from the Ranch. I think they still do, but there's this guy. He doesn't work anymore, but he's at a school. He's like, his name's Darren Crumwoody. And I know that he was like one of the top Lightwave architectural designers, did all this stuff. I know that he does stuff in Power Animator, but he would be the person, and probably with the school. Why don't you reach out to him? And he said, so call this, the school's called Gnomon or Gnomon or something. He's like, but just go talk to them. And so I called Darren up, and I'm like, Darren, hi, my name's Tefft, and I'm trying to come out here and get a job in Lightwave. And he's like, well, Lightwave isn't really that. I said, well, what do you guys teach? He's like, well, we just opened up. We're a full-fledged school that focuses on Maya training. And we are teaching programs by industry professionals. It's the Alex Alvarez, who is the founder of this. He teaches a majority of the classes. I teach a lot of the modeling. And then we have a couple other teachers. It's a small school, but he's like, this is what we do. But Lightwave, we don't teach it. He's like, here's a couple names for you to call people. And this is this is basically Friday afternoon in Los Angeles. And so I go back to my hotel and I go up and pack up and get on a flight and fly back to Chicago because I grew up in Chicago and I live in Chicago. My car was in Chicago, and so I flew back home. And I get home and I'm kind of discouraged. And I talk to my dad. He's just like, "So how was the remaining days?" Because he had left a couple days earlier. And I told him, and he was just like, he's like, "Well, he's like, we'll just keep digging around. I mean, we'll find something. You'll find something." I'm like, "All right." So then I get in the car on Sunday and I start to drive back up to Minneapolis. And this is what happened next. So I'm driving to Minneapolis on Sunday and I get stuck by a mini blizzard and I can no longer drive. So Sunday, I am sitting at a McDonald's and there's a payphone and, 3-hour time difference. And I basically am like, wonder if I could learn Maya. So I call Gnomon and I'm like, talk to Darren and I'm like, Darren, I got a odd question. I'm like, could I come there and like, how are long your classes like this? He's like, well, we're about to, we start week 1 tomorrow. But our classes are 10 weeks long. So you could come back in 10 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have 10 weeks. I have to graduate in 15 weeks. And I need to do my senior project. And I've now decided I'm going to do my senior project in Maya. Just because if Hollywood's changing to Maya and that's the only way I'm going to get a job, then I need to learn Maya and I need to learn it from you. Because supposedly you guys are the best school. So he's like, well, here, let me put you on the phone with Kristen Birschbach. And so Christian gets on the phone and she's just like, so what? And I'm like, so if I miss the first week, but I'm there by next Sunday, could I enroll in your classes? And she's just like, no. I mean, yeah, but I mean, no. I mean, how you're going to convince your school, your college, to let you transfer in a week? I'm like, yes. So she's just like, sure, if you can get here and you can get this confirmed by Wednesday so I can get you a schedule by end of week, then yeah, you can start our first class next Sunday. So get up to Minneapolis, wake up Monday morning, bright and early, go straight to the school, start tracking down everyone I need to. And I'm asking everyone, I'm like, okay, I want to go to LA. I have nothing left to do except for my senior project. I have no other classes. So I'm sitting here doing nothing anyhow. So can I go do nothing in Los Angeles at another school that's probably better than you? And they basically started asking around. Tuesday afternoon, I just kept on harping them and they finally gave me, the dean was just like, I mean, I don't see why not. We can't, you're still paying for the term, but, you're still our student. But if you want to go continue education somewhere else, go ahead. And so I reached out to Kristen and I'm like, all right, they said yes. And I find out years later that Alex, Darren, and Kristen and Pam they all shared an office very, very close to each other. And they all were laughing giddily. Like there's this kid who wants to come here in a week and learn Maya in 9 weeks to do his senior thesis. And sure enough, on Wednesday she called, and I had a brutal schedule. It was 9 weeks long. I had 5 10-week courses, 3 1-week courses, and I had one, which I forgot to add. I had 1 5-week course, and basically that summed up to about also in addition 48 hours of lab time. Now, back then, Gnomon was all SGIs. There were no Windows. So to get a computer was the only time that you could learn Maya because you couldn't take it home and it was way too much money to buy it and machines were insanely expensive. And so you had to take that lab time. So on Thursday, I made travel arrangements. Friday, I said goodbye to my friends. And Saturday, I was in Los Angeles with really no place to live, but I was sitting in lab 2 with Intro to Maya book learning Salty the Seal, which if you guys don't know that, look it up. It's hilarious because you can never get the color of the ball the same. But that was the start. And so I just lived there and I loved every second. And I have to say, back then, the coolest things were that not only was I at, one of the top schools, they had an ad for their school, which I took back to MCAD and posted it all over the place, which is these amazing images of all the working professionals. And it just said, can your teachers do this? Ours can. And to this day, it's the hands down the best sales tool for Gnomon, because it really is true. I mean, it is the top artists, top professionals, top students come out of it. But the other thing is that I would be sitting in a seat like in lab 2, and I would be next to the teacher station, which most of you guys who have taken labs there were, or that you guys know about. And right to my right is Alex, or right to my right is Darren. And at any point I could just be like, can I ask you guys a question? And they always helped. And so, I mean, like, I had an experience that I will always, cherish, which is, I really got to learn from, 2 of the greatest, educators who created one of the greatest schools. And so they really helped me kind of, streamline and get this animated short. Now, I am going to show it, and it is, I have to say that it was a little embarrassing, but it's 9 weeks of never knowing Maya and putting something together to graduate MCAD and to then come back and enter in the certificate program as the second group of certificate graduates. So it was called Misconception. Um, and my understanding is that I don't think you had sound on that one, so I apologize. But um, one of the things that it was representative of, and what I was trying to do was, it was the idea that, you are in a world of just marketing madness, and there, everyone has done whatever the society has told them. You wear this, you dress like this, you do this, you buy this phone, you do everything. And the idea of being an individual is taken away. And if you have no choice in that, would you rather live or would you rather die? And he chose to, even though he turned into what society was telling him, he ended up basically forcing himself to fall over. That was the premise, and I don't know if it was successful. The school really liked it. They were more impressed with how ambitious I was with doing something of that complexity. But, that basically got me graduated, and then moved to LA, and I entered the certificate program. And I graduated in 1999 with Matt Klein and Steve Haskell. both of which have gone on to an amazing careers. But it was at that point there was only one term, one class every 5 terms that would graduate. So it was not like it is now, which is every term, you guys have a graduation. There was really only 2 terms at that point that had graduated the program. Um, but with that and my little macaroni and cheese and my just some of the other things I had done at the school, I landed a job at Look Effects. And at the time, they were just also starting out, and they only had the 4 partners. I was one of their first employees and their first artist, so I came on as a 3D lead because they didn't have anyone that was really up to speed with Maya. Um, and so then we uh, sorry. So we then basically I started working on films. The first project I did there was a commercial for Dodge. Um, and then went on to a television show, Witchblade. And as I grew with them, they grew as a company, and they became a powerhouse in the industry in the early 2000s. And so I was with them from 2000 to 2008, which was pretty incredible. Um, and this is just a representation of the work that I contributed to back then. So a lot of that, the thing that Look really was known for were the hidden effects. So a lot of things that just kind of scrub through a little bit. Um, like the teardrop is all digital, it's all CG. The maggot, which the funny thing is that there was a panel that was done on Passion of the Christ, and there was someone in the audience, and for real, they raised their hand and they say, "So, where did you find a maggot wrangler?" And it was quite comical because the guy Ted Ray basically said, "No, no, no, that was CG." Um, but I mean, a lot of the effects that we were known for were hidden effects. I was able to get back to my graphic design love, and I designed the titles with Wes Anderson on Life Aquatic. So we had a really good relationship. But in 2008, I was kind of at my ending point with them. And so I left and I went on and did some freelance at other studios like Zoic and Stardust, and kind of hopped around. And then one afternoon, I was on vacation, and Darren now calls me and says, "Hey, how happy are you in working as a professional?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of bored with bouncing around." He's like, "Well, Alex and I were talking, and we kind of need to refresh the curriculum, and we're thinking of a couple new ideas. Would you consider coming on with us um, as the director of education and help us kind of revamp the curriculum and figure out what we need and find some new teachers and stuff like that?" I'm like, "You know what? This would be perfect. I love Gnomon more than anything. I think that they helped me get where I was. And at that point, it was, 8 years of being a professional, and I was kind of burnt out. I mean, this industry takes a lot of out of you. I mean, 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, working on Christmas, working on New Year's. I mean, working, and kind of feeling like you're just being beaten down can take a toll on you. It is rewarding without a doubt. But at this time, I was at my point where I wanted to break. And so then I said, yeah. And so I went to the school and ran with the curriculum. And, I had, I think, a good influence on some of the classes. And we started the tracks program, which later on became, what made the school accredited. And the other thing that happened while I was there was Alex, Darren, and I. Alex was getting these odd calls to do this, kind of work and to, do pitches and stuff like that. And Alex is, as Alex is, he's super busy and couldn't, handle it all. So Darren and I and he would do these little side projects, and we had a ton of fun doing them. And we kind of had this idea, just like, well, why don't we start to bring the opportunity for the students to have real world experience? J.J. Abrams reached out to us and said, "Hey, you know what? I have this perfect opportunity for this CG." God, Spock. Why am I Leonard Nimoy? And we need this done. And do you have any students that would want to work on it? And sure enough, Alex was doing his, portfolio class, and a lot of people came in, and through the group of us in the school, we did some successful shots for Fringe. Neville came and asked us to do, because Neville was doing these at the time, Green Lantern, and he wanted to see not just what his characters looked like, but he wanted to feel the weight of them, because each character, especially Green Lantern, which had hundreds of characters, he couldn't do it all by himself. I mean, Neville Page is amazing, but at the same time, that's a lot of characters that he had to design. And so he would design us characters in ZBrush and Maya and send them over to us. We would rig them up and give it some weight and some idea of like, how do they move and stuff like that, so that Neville had a sense of like, okay, how do I change the structure and the body and the anatomy of these characters. And it was a lot of fun. And so we kind of got to talking, and we're like, well, why don't we maybe make a mini, like an offshoot of Gnomon, and have like Gnomon Studios. And we created Gnomon Studios, which then came on to be hiring, directors to come in and do these short pieces like White Swan and Plus and Minus. And, we've done some other ones. We had Many Tobias come in and direct one, and and Miguel has been someone who's come in. And so, and it's still something that, has been a success, and it allows, the students to work on something that is seen more than just, in their portfolio. And this is just a little bit of a collection of some of the work that, we had done. The other thing is that I forgot is, the VES, the Visual Effects Society, came and asked us to do 2 tributes. One was to show the history of visual effects and come up with their bumpers for the 50 greatest films. And so I directed this kind of montage of having all these little movies come together, like Indiana Jones' Whip becomes part of a tail, and then you're on Superman's chest, and you sink down, and it's the trench from the X-wings, and and so it was this really awesome kind of marriage of like collage of all of these great iconic films. And then the following year, Steven Spielberg was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award, and they asked us to do a tribute to him. And so we came up with something similar, but more of a painterly effect. And I had a great experience with these students, and we did some great work. And here's just a little bit of reflection. So that was what we had kind of left it at. I mean, we had Gnomon Studios going on, and the tracks program was, looking like it was in good shape. And the one thing that I think happened for me was I got the bug to get back into production. And I think that Darren and Alex also realized that I had reached a point with the school that I needed to change, and so we kind of parted our ways. And and I left the school and went on and started to get into what has now become where I am today, which is a visualization supervisor. And I landed a position with Halon, which I was there for 9 years, eight, 9 years, and then was brought on to Pixamundo, where I later became the head of visualization there, and worked on a ton of films. And the entire second half of this talk is going to be a lot on what previs and visualization is. So I have a lot of material to show, a lot of stuff that is very very cool, and I think you guys will enjoy it. But what then happened was not just because of COVID, but it's been brought to my attention over years that there is a need for like a couple other new boutique type studios, something that's a little less of a studio. And I and 2 other good friends have been talking over the last 6 months. This was something that has been in the works for a while, but the project I was on before COVID, was put on hold. And, I was looking, and my friends were looking, and we were just like, why don't we take the time and just kind of figure out a way that we can start something together? And so we started Opsis, which Opsis is a Greek word for the spectacle in dramatic performance, so in theater. And we just started this, back in. Technically, we started it in April. We officially launched in June, and we are a very small boutique type strike force, and the main goal is that we want to kind of come in with a solution for production. We don't want to be the end all be all answer, but we want to be an option that allows us to help with Previz, Postvis, Techvis, figuring out how virtual production is going to go, in-house finals. It's really just going to be a tool for, and another reason why this is very interesting to us is that, you know, directors and producers were very happy with what and how I worked, and they wanted a relationship with me, and that's what this is going to allow is me to just go in more as an individual and bring on people when I want, and we can kind of build that relationship with the directors and producers and take something from, you know, concept to, you know, somewhat finale. So that is kind of where and how I got here. If there are any questions or people want to take a bathroom break, even though it's only 48 minutes into it.
Hey, Tefft, we can take on a few of the questions that have come in from the chat if you like.
Sure.
We've got a queue that's been building up, so we'll maybe go through a few and then you can continue, and we'll use a little bit more time at the end to pick up as many of the questions as we can. All right, I'm just going to take a look at our queue of questions that have been coming in here. All right, so we have, Shailesh, I think Narnware asks, what advice would you give yourself, Tefft, as a 25-year-old? So if you could go back in time, give yourself some advice, what would you say and why?
Sleep more earlier. So try to build up more endurance for this career. No, I would say listen, be receptive to criticism, because at 25, and I think like even when I was teaching, you know, you do think that you know it all, because I mean you are at that point you are fresh and you are paying attention and you are receptive to a lot of influence, especially artistically, where you want to contribute. And sometimes the best thing to do is just take a step back, listen to, when I say the grown-ups, I don't mean like the grown-ups, but the, you know, the producers and the directors and the people who that's their job and they're bringing you on to help their job. And I think it's just listen to, you know, what people are giving you the criticism. It's not, and that other thing that I always told, you know, people, you know, is that don't think that you can figure it out on your own. Ask questions. Don't be embarrassed to ask a question. If you don't know how to do something, it is not a reflection on you. It's a better reflection on you if you don't waste the time and just go and say, hey, by the way, you know, how do you want this? Or, you know, hey, sorry, I totally forget. What's the shader with the you know, the metallic on it? You know. Blin or, you know, Fong or whatever. I mean, so it's like, you know, it's everyone makes and has brain farts, everyone, but it's like if you sit there and fumble on it, that's a poor reflection, because if you're wasting a day or 2 days on something that is as simple as someone being like, oh, it's right here, then that's money. And that's the only thing that people really are going to be mad at, is if you're wasting their time and money. And you know, I think that I was not, I spoke quick, I reacted quick, I still react quick. And it has gotten me in not a lot of trouble, but it has gotten me into situations that, you know, I'm having to backpedal or something like that. So, you know, it's just, you're better off to, you know, be humble, be, you know, a lot of humility, and just kind of take a step back and just listen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, another question that we've had come in is looks like it's from the username is Renderman Pro. Interestingly enough, their question is: having been in the industry for 20 plus years, what do you see? How do you see the industry changing in the next 10 to 20 years, especially regarding traditional 3D modeling, animation, and VFX professions?
That is talked about all next, but
Awesome.
I mean the main answer is Unreal and real time rendering. It is, it is definitely going to be the game changer. It is going to allow for, people to get results quicker and more efficient. I think it is one of those tools. It is one of those ideas. It's going to impact our industry so much, both positively and negatively, because people don't realize, even though it's real time, it's not. And I'm going to get into that a little bit. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in prep. But the main thing is that I think the main transition that we're going to see now moving forward, that has been what has happened over the last 20 years, is that we started to progress towards, just fix it in post, and directors and producers getting lazy and being like, nah, don't worry, we'll just paint it out. I think what we're going to see is, especially with the way the industry is right now, like COVID, is that the prep and getting things properly set up in Unreal and in Maya and your models, getting that all ready so that you're not fixing it in post, but you're solving it in pre. That's going to be the biggest thing that I think is going to affect us. I mean, you look back at how films are made in the 50s and 60s. I mean, like the rear projections and stuff like that. I mean, we're getting back to that. It's just it's in a different world, because now it's linked to a camera that can show parallax, and you can change lighting, and it affects the characters like real time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next part of the presentation, because all of this subject matter it's relatively new, and it's great to hear from someone who's got their hands on it right now in the industry. So are you ready to continue? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
So, obviously, the future of digital production, how is visualization changing? We just touched base a little bit on it. I have to put this up there. No recordings. So, at the end of the day, I mean, this is an amazing quote. The most amazing thing for me is that every single person who sees a movie, not necessarily one of my movies, brings a set of unique experiences. Now, through careful manipulation and good storytelling, you can get everyone to clap at the same time, be hopefully laugh at the same time, and to be afraid at the same time. Steven Spielberg. At the end of the day, visual effects are amazing, hands down. They look great. But we've all seen a movie where the visual effects are the story. And it doesn't matter how good the visual effects are if the story is not there to keep the viewer engaged. So at the end of the day, it's about storytelling. You can have a stick figure, and if it's a story that captivates you for an hour and a half, then why do you need visual effects? But obviously you need the story. So the way and how visualization allows directors to say action early on, because they are developing their story, they are developing their what it is that they want to show. A lot of this starts with concept design. You guys, it's the one thing Alex has always been, and Gnomon has always been, a huge advocate for is like traditional art. Now, I mean, traditional art is not, it's relative now, because it's all on the computer, so it doesn't matter if you can draw or not. I mean, you can do photo manipulation to get concepts and stuff like that. But it's the idea of having composition, figuring stuff out. But I mean, concept design is huge at the school, and it is going to continue to be huge. But for us, concept design is part of the story, because if you have good concept design, then you can really start to work out, well, why and how is this going to be implemented in the story? And, I have worked with some phenomenal concept people. over time, and I've worked with Aaron Sims, I've worked with Neville. This is Tully Summers, who I had the pleasure of working with on Tomorrowland. These are just some of the images that he came up with. But even early on, visualization is to figure out, well, how will this stuff work? So, how do we have um, a shield bathtub? What does that mean? How does that part? So when Brad Bird says, "Oh, Frank and Casey are going to hop in a bathtub," he hits a button and it goes chunk, 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 chunk like Batman and shoots out. Huh? So you get that, and then you have amazing artists like Tully start coming up with stuff. But then once he has that, he needs to figure out, well, how does this move? And a lot of times, this is where the collaboration comes in, because Tully can give me a model. I can try some things as far as motion. He can then come back. He can try it himself, but it just gets the mechanics and how everything starts to work. And this is just an example of the mechanics that he ended up building, and he did all the modeling and everything of it. And the only thing that he and I went back and forth on is how does this animate? Because I can do a quick concept and show him something, and he can then take it and flush it out. So concept is part one. The other thing, like I was saying earlier, I mean, it's about storytelling, and how do you tell a proper story, and choreographing sequences, or virtual production or whatever. Storyboards this is the director's favorite tool, even though there's a lot of directors out there who still love previs and think visualization is the future. They will always start with a pen and paper, or pen and tablet. I mean, just to get quick sketches out, to just get compositions, to get framing. And and again, I mean, I've had the great fortune of working with amazing storyboard artists. A lot of these are Richard Bennett, and I've also worked with an amazing storyboard comic artist, Rodolfo. And I think that what that first tells you is like, okay, well, this is what they want to do. But what this is not telling you is pace. This is not telling you timing. So what do you do then? So you take your storyboards and you put them up on a wall, and you look at them and you're like, okay, this feels right, but it's not an action. It's not like, is this 5 minutes? Is this 10 minutes? Is this a minute? How long are we looking? So what do we do next? Well, we basically do an animatic. But as much as you're seeing all this, I mean, it's the renderings are amazing. I think we've frozen. Did we freeze?
Yeah, it looks like at least the video that you're playing back froze, but now we're back. We're seeing the previous slide.
Yeah. So I cut it a little bit short, but you get the gist of it. I mean, the renderings are amazing, and to look at those, I would stare at those for hours when we were designing shots, and I loved them, but I didn't get a sense of timing. I didn't get a sense of pace and drama and stuff like that. So that is where Previz comes in, and the biggest thing is like, okay, so now we have that. Let's build it out. This is a collection of my work and my partner's work, just to give you an example of just a reel of our Previz. So that is just kind of a quick, just collection of like what Previz is and kind of where it has gone. Hey, Adam, real quick, I got a note saying if there's a way we can turn up the audio, that would be great.
For sure thing, yeah.
So that basically takes us to the different types of what Previz is used for. It's used for choreographing sequences. Is one of the main ones. Figuring out, flight sequences, impossible cameras, and the other is just figuring out the story. So with the boards that you had seen, which we got cut off on, this is basically what the Previz ended up being. Oh.
Whoops, Tefft, it looks like we lost your screen share.
Yeah.
We'll get that back up and running in a second, guys. Thanks for your patience.
You got it?
There we go. Looks like we've got it back, Miranda. You seeing it? Great.
So that was, that was something that I was a part of over at Pixamundo, and I had an amazing team with that. Nate Hopkins, Logan. But the crazy thing about that is that it looks like it was done in Unreal, and it wasn't. It was actually done in Maya, and I had an amazing co-supervisor, Chris Staler, who was brilliant with a lot of his tricks and renderings and stuff like that, that just upped the quality on that in a way that, some aspects was not faster than real time, but it allowed us to get a more realistic look. So it really turned out as an amazing piece. Those are fight sequences. Flight sequences. And I think that is one opportunity for a director to really flush things out, because we did that entire sequence in we had a first pass in 3 days, 4 days. And then Roland would come to us and give us, creative notes and director notes. And he was able to test a lot of options out and figure out what is it that he wants to do. How do we want to fly? How does the story, and it really deviated from the storyboard. And the storyboards were amazing, but he didn't sense the urgency after we did a first um, board to Previz pass. So, it allows the director to, within a month, flush out several sequences of their film. So the other aspect of it is impossible cameras. And like, what is an impossible camera? Well, it's cameras that either need to be on multiple locations, or a drone that turns into, or a helicopter that turns into a drone, that turns into a Steadicam, that turns into an iPhone, that then goes to an SLR with a macro. It's like you never know what it is, but you have to figure out a way. How do we go from space, not from space? Let's say, how do we go from flying over the Hollywood sign down into someone's apartment seamlessly? This is an example of that. Oh. So this, I'll say it again, but this particular sequence was, I'll just talk afterwards.
Are you coming? You can see me? We don't have all day. Northbound on Napa Park. Next stop, Space.
So that was basically 12. It was 12 minutes long. Was the completed previs. It was done over 7 countries with several. I think it was over 20. No, it was even more than that. It was like 20 or 30 different camera changes. So we would have to hide the edits some way so that they can go from one country to another, to one state to another. It was this very complicated idea of how do we stitch all this together, and where do we find the transitions. And first what we ended up doing was we found the story, we found the camera, and then after that we figured out the transitions. How do we change lenses without seeming like it's jarring, because they did not like doing these Hitchcock type cameras or anything like that, but we needed a way to elegantly have these transitions. It was one of the most fun experiences, because it was called the experience, I've ever had a chance to supervise. And it took us a long time to figure it out, and I had an amazing team at Halon that really did this. I was working with Travis Yee and Zach Wong, and it was this great collaboration of going back and forth with how do we do this, how do we figure this out, how do we tell the story. And this was the most interactive. Brad was with us all the time. He was always there, and there was a running joke that if production couldn't find him, he was with the animators, because that's what he is. He's an amazing animator. So he wanted to play with and be and explore. But then that takes real quick back. I'm just going to show I'm going to cut this off. I'm not going to show the full thing, but this is just kind of shows you back to the previs to board comparison. This will show kind of a window in window.
God damn it, that magnificent son of a bitch actually found him. All right, boys. I'm in 6. We got the first bastard in line. What the hell? Fuck you, supposed to go for the far carrier. Stay on me. How's the beauty, sir? Right on the deck.
So that just kind of showed, boards to Previz as just, as another option as far as, where it's important that you can stay to boards and figure out, how does this work and how does it not work with, the limitations of just, still renderings that are beautiful, but not in motion. Like how much time do we stay on it? How do we edit it? Obviously sound also helps. And that's one thing that we typically try to always do is that if we have a good editor or if we're editing it ourselves, I mean, as up until within the last 2 years, everything that was Previz, the supervisor on the show would edit it. Very rarely would the production have an editor on yet, and they couldn't afford to hire an editor just to do Previz. So that fell on our hands, which was a lot of fun because that's another skill set that I was able to, refine and learn and do, which is, how do you edit? How do you do mixing, audio mixing and stuff like that? And so artistically and as a creative, I had a ton of fun because I was learning new software, new aspects and stuff like that. But like on the 2 dogfights commercials, pieces, I had an amazing editor, Will Appleby, who really flushed everything out. And then, he and I would do the audio together, or he would do it. I would just suggest things. So obviously the other aspect of Previz is storytelling. So, I hope I'm not boring people with videos and I'm talking enough on top of it. Am I good, Adam?
You're doing great.
All right.
This is cool.
So,
Yeah.
moving forward on, figuring out story. The next thing I'm going to show you is another sequence that, in my opinion, this was a lot of fun to work on because it was a lot of action, but a little bit of dialogue and planning, but they needed to figure out and do Techvis on what walls needed to be wild. We had the accurate specs of an apartment or of a house where we needed to figure out where the limitations of cameras are. One of the biggest challenges is that the 2 characters, the lead actor, I believe is 6'1" or 6'2", and the female lead was like 5'1", so like a full foot. So I mean, it's like this and like this. And so it's like, how do you do this? And so we had to identify when we would pull off of them, come around, come back, and then a grip would run in, lay down an apple box, and she would step up on the apple box. So he's there and she's there. So their over the shoulders wasn't that jarring. So you'll see tricks like that in this, which it's pretty fun. Oh, the other thing is that, you know, the nice thing about Previz is you can do face gen on people, like lead characters, but you can also do them on your crew. So see if you find any Easter eggs of people in this. Sorry, also to interrupt, this is where the concept comes in. So, like I said, that was a ton of fun. Couple things just to kind of go back. One of the benefits of figuring out with Previz is that when he turns this on, there's no understanding of what it's doing. So, you know, the challenge was like, okay, well, what is this device? I mean, there's been no explanation of what it does or anything like that. So we needed to figure out a way to visually, and if you caught it, great. If you didn't, then we failed. But a lot of people did catch it. And what it is that if you, well, monkey. if you watch right here, you'll see the lamp flies through. And with the sound effect, you know it disappears because you don't see it break or anything. The other funny thing is that there's a lot of Easter eggs that, you know, we're allowed to have fun with and we try to do. And the biggest one was, where did his top half go? So in another sequence, we have a legless body fumbling around in a crowd of people. So it was a lot of fun to, you know, just, you know, answer that question, which was, you know, you just went somewhere else in the world. And that was a lot of fun. And then, like I was saying, if you didn't catch it, I decided to add myself in the previs. So, you know, we have a lot of fun like that. Just, you know, the ability to experience and explore different ideas. You get to push yourself as an animator, and you get to push yourself as, you know, a creative and come up with different ideas. And I may be the one that is face to face with the director, but the director comes around and sits with every single one of the team, and he's very, you know, depending upon who the right director is, they're very encouraging about getting ideas from you, because I mean, technically he's paying, which is another thing. Going back to the beginning, when I started Previz, when I started visualization, you know, I just came off of, you know, 8 years at Look Effects, which was, you know, one of the top visual effects studios during the time. I'm doing these final effects that you can go to the movie and sit and watch, and you're like, wow, mom, dad, family, that's mine. I did that. So when I heard about Previz, I was just like, I'm never going to see this stuff. You know, no one's ever going to see this stuff. Maybe on a behind the scenes DVD, but the majority of your work is never seen. You can tell people, well, I worked on that. But then I started to get into the idea that it's like, I'm helping with the whole story. I'm actually contributing as an artist. You're not just doing one shot for 3 months. That's 5 seconds up on the screen where you're like, oh, did you see that? Did you see that little explosion? I did that explosion. 3 months and I did that explosion. No, you can go sit there and with your friends and say, do you see this whole sequence? I helped plan this. I helped plan 3 minutes of an entire film. And a lot of times you're doing more than an hour, sorry, that's an exaggeration. You're doing more than a half hour on an entire film being shown. So you can say, I helped design that. I mean, you look at people like that work on the Marvel movies, and they do the giant reveal of the characters. It's like, that didn't come from just a bunch of visual effects artists. That came from a pre-visualization team. That came from an amazing, you know, it came from a great company like Third Floor that, you know, is known for doing these grand fights and stuff like that. And that's the thing that's great, is you're contributing to the grand story and helping the audience be like, wow, that's you. Not that shot is me. That this whole section of a film is you. So, tangent, forgot where I was saying, but yeah. So pre-visualization, I mean, you're basically, the director comes around and asks, and you can contribute and you can give suggestions, and he may be like, hey, what do you think about this? I mean, all my artists that I've ever worked with have contributed one-to-one with the director and been like, hey, what would you think about this? And they're gonna be like, never thought about that. You know, a perfect example is that I'm gonna show Goosebumps, which is kind of the reverse. I had shown previs to storyboard. Now I'm going to show previs to final, just to show how close that they keep to what it is that we do. So that when the director goes on set, that's another nice thing about previs. And we'll get into Techvis too, but a lot of times what previs is solving is the on-set answer. Because why pay an entire craft service, production assistants, drivers, catering, support staff, wardrobes assistants, pet wranglers, dog wranglers, other assistants, the cat's assistant. You have hundreds of people, and if a director goes on set and is just like, Hmm. Can you stand over there? No. Let me think. I don't know. Can you bring me a 35 millimeter? I don't know. You're solving this with a team of 4 people in an office, and he can go. Can you try a 35? Can you try a 50? Can you move him over here? Can we wild this wall? And he's solving these. So when he's on set, he also the crew and everyone is just like, yeah, let's go, because he's just like, I need a 35. I need to be 5 feet from the actor. I need to be 6 feet high, and I need to move all that stuff in the back. So you're solving these because he sees and knows what he wants. So this is a perfect example of the comparison. And the suggestion is at the very end of the first section, which I'll probably cut it at, you'll see a little gummy bear on a door handle. And it was one of my artists, Logan, who basically suggested going up and flicking. Well, actually, the initial suggestion was he picks it up and eats it. But then we ended up flicking it off, and yeah, I mean, and that's what made it in the film. So yeah, so that gives you an idea of how I mean they stay pretty true to it, and I mean sometimes they'll re-edit, and as you saw, like, things didn't perfectly line up, but I mean that's what happens. But I mean, for the most part, I mean where Previz really does come in is solving a lot of that prep solution and trying to find the stories so that you're paying a small group of talented artists. You're paying them to help figure out your story and to solve any problems, which that comes to the next set. Is like, so now that we have all this previs, Ridley Scott basically says technology continues to bring us wondrous advances in filmmaking to improve how we view movies. And that is very true, and that will always be true, because the advancements of technology is going to make films always improve. So now that we've shot it, now we got to figure out how to do the Techvis. And Techvis is basically, it's figuring out, like, okay, if you're on a soundstage, what's the configuration? How big of a crane? How big of rigs do we need? What kind of lenses? I mean, it's a way to test things out, and it also is another aspect of figuring out impossible, cameras. I had the great fortune of working with at Pixo Mars Oliver and Matt McClurg, who they really, stepped up the level of, Techvis. And I mean, as you'll see in this, a lot of the stuff that we did for solving, one in particular, you'll see in here, we needed to figure out a way to have someone in another location drive a car. And then how do we film that person driving the car in a stage in another state? Because they couldn't travel. And so we Techvised different options as how we could do it. We also Techvised giant stages where we needed to have a rotating room, as you can see in the lower right picture, and and then a lot of the stuff on Midway is like they want to shoot the pilots, but how do we do how do we get them? And then you'll also see a quick excerpt in here of just kind of what is going to come after this, which is virtual production and the use of LED screens to cast light and to not. For this particular film, it wasn't used to be the backgrounds. It was used to simulate explosions and gunfires so that they could get the natural lighting on the face like they were getting in fires. But here is just a collection of Techvis. So yeah, so that I think, in my opinion, just a ton of fun. Is figuring out like how do you achieve this and helping, the DPs and the producers, like, how do we do this in a budget? And at the end of the day, it comes to a art versus money. Tug of war where the producers need to keep within budget and the artists and the directors need to keep their story. And how do you balance those two? And visualization is how you balance it, because we can accommodate that. We can figure out, okay, well, try this, or here's a cheaper way, because that basically is the inception shot. And it's like, how do you create inception on an episodic budget? And and I think that's a challenge, and that's the fun of it, is that at the end of the day, as artists, we're all problem solving. We're trying to figure out how to figure out the composition. How do we get a viewer to enjoy what we're doing? I mean, yes, we all have stories to tell of our own, and we have voices that we want to be heard, but we also want to we're approached with an obstacle, and we need to figure out a way to figure it out and answer that, or solve that obstacle. Which is, we're in a world right now with COVID where, Hollywood is shut down. I mean, what are we doing? How do we shoot? How do we shoot with social distancing? How do we do it? And what the next part is, I mean, basically it's all real time. It's like a lot of new technology that is, Epic has stepped up in so many ways that, it's impressive to know that just a year ago, Brian Poole, who is, a Gnomon alum and an amazing friend of mine, and, he is over at Epic, just, pushing the boundaries as far as how do we get Unreal out of just the game engine and into Hollywood. And, and he's been training, and anyone who's taken his class is fortunate to, learn how we're doing it. But I mean, this is the solution. This is the future. A lot of the stuff that you're going to see now, I have to give a lot of credit to a lot of people who are allowing me to show stuff. And, and we'll start off by, Previz is now going into an Unreal solution. And I think that, this is something that more and more studios are approaching, and more vendors are approaching. And I think that I was very fortunate to be affiliated with Halon when Dan and AJ and Casey and Ryan McCoy, Casey Pike and AJ Briones and Dan Gregoire, the founder of Halon, they were pioneers in this, and they basically decided to take it to the next level. And AJ successfully did apes in Unreal, and it's absolutely breathtaking. You can see the difference between, what I was showing earlier and this. Now there is a price to pay. This takes longer. I mean, it looks prettier, but you have to prep a little bit longer. You have to, get things in the pipeline and make sure that artists can access it. And then you have to get out of Maya. And a lot of this is where Epic is solving it and Autodesk is solving it. But at the time, Halon was, developing their own tools, and they just were amazing. And I was fortunate to be with them, on the coattails of, them developing this stuff. And it's just gorgeous. But yeah, this is all done with, AJ Briones, Casey, and Ryan, AJ supervising. And it's beautiful. And then you have what's coming next, which is, it's the in-camera visual effects. It's the fact that, no longer are we going to have a green screen. No longer are we going to have, we are going to always have a green screen, at least for a while. But like, to answer that question earlier, there's technologies out there that, it is available. I mean, LED screens basically generate, a channel, and cameras can hold that channel, and they can know that what's being piped into the camera is digital and what's not is analog. And therefore, auto alpha, and it's like you don't have to. So if you need to change the background or tweak it, or you have alpha. Now we're not there yet. It's coming. I mean, back in 2001, I remember going to SIGGRAPH, and some of the people from Look and I went, and they were showing us the Z depth camera, which literally you put, like in Maya, you put the far clipping plane and it cuts out the person magically. Now, I mean, any time you go to SIGGRAPH, they show you a demo that you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then, now we're, 2020, shit's not there. So it's like, all right, well, wasn't that amazing because we're not using it in production. Which, a year ago, 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago when we were trying stuff with Unreal, Ryan and I were doing tests at Halon trying to say that, look, we can do our in-house visual effects using Unreal Engine. Not full frame. We could do about a quarter of a frame. You give us a quarter of a frame, put it in the background of a mirror, in the background of a window or something, and we can replace it with CG, and we could do it on the quick because it's Unreal, and we don't have to render it. We don't have to use Arnold. We don't have to use V-Ray. And we did a lot of tests with it, and and of course it didn't pick up because back then it was just like, no, there's no way it can't hold up in 4K, and it couldn't. But we knew that it was coming, and it's here. And so there is, I think, the biggest contribution to this is Matt Workman and Magnopus and Lux Machina. They're pushing it, and Epic and Ari. And so, this is groundbreaking, and you guys have seen this stuff. It was used on Mandalorian, and I had the fortune of being an animation supervisor with Pixo on a few of the episodes, and I'm gonna at the end show one of the episodes, but this was basically not the episode, but the section. This was the LED screen being used, and there was a little cleanup, but it was there and it worked. And again, it's not as easy as just like throw up an LED screen and you're good to go. There are tools that are making it easier, but it still is a lot of proper prep and making sure it works. But before even today, Oblivion was one of the first films that really utilized this because they went and shot all these, HDRI's domes, 6K footage that they then projected on a huge 360, basically cylinder. So with that, and give as much credit as I can, but this is just kind of a compilation. So, I mean, there's been a lot of success with it. Pixamundo did Oblivion, and they had a huge success with Oblivion, and and now studios are starting to use it more and more. And with the way that we're doing social distancing, this is going to be the next level. And the thing that a lot of people aren't realizing is that that's what people are considering virtual production, is that. Yet there is an entire another side of it that people are not recognizing, and there are studios that are using it, and it's brilliant. And I had the fortune of doing it recently on it was a kind of a interactive idea, but it was a test that I directed, utilizing Pinocchio, and it's asset review. I mean, because if it's Unreal, it's real time. So we can change textures, we can change size, we can do everything. And you can throw on a VR helmet and be like, you know what? I mean, imagine getting a concept of the Incredible Hulk. They hand you the piece of paper, and the director looks at it, and the Incredible Hulk is that big on the piece of paper. How do you know how that feels? So why not get the model, get them in a pose, move around, kind of like what we were doing with Neville Page, throw on a headset, an Oculus, throw that in there, and you're in there, and you're like, holy crap, that's too big. And you can now have a review of your assets real time. One of the things that we did on Midway is that we gave the USS Enterprise on an Oculus, so that Roland could literally stand on the deck and be like, wow, it's a lot smaller than I expected. Because you think of an aircraft carrier as being the largest ship ever, but aircraft carrier in the 50s is a lot smaller than the one in the 2000s. So, so there's a difference between what you read in history, and you go back and you spec it out and you look at it on camera, and then you feel it. And so asset review is going to be huge. And this is another benefit of virtual production, because directors can go and early on start to look at their concepts and understand what is going on. So like, here is an example of what we did. So as you can see, there's a live person that's actually in there able to look down at Pinocchio and figure out, how big is he? Do I want him to come up to my ankles, my knees, and you can see, just the kind of God view of a real actor playing around and figuring out, how big do we want our character? So, there are concept houses that are starting to utilize this. And I think more and more, even as students, go get an Oculus, and when you present your concepts, have it ready and be like, here, throw this on, and then load up your scene, and then they can look around and get a sense of not just a rendering or on an iPad, but they're engulfed in it, and they're figuring out, and like, holy shit, this is amazing. Talk about like getting early sign-offs on your concepts. So that's another aspect. Another one is location scouting. Magnopus is really kind of pioneering this technology, and they're going in, and there are some other studios that are starting to go around and scan stuff, but there's one place that has already done it. It's called Google Earth. And you basically can pull up Google Earth and go to a location. I'm not saying that location scouting isn't needed. Of course it's needed, but early on you can fly around and get a sense of a couple different locations and be like, okay, does this area work? Does this area work? And you kind of figure it out. On Battleship was the first time I used this with Pete, because he couldn't get clearance for one of his sequences to shoot in China. And so we needed to go find another location. And so we just quickly scoured different areas in China, trying to figure out like, okay, can we go here? Can we go here? Can we go here? And then once he found 2 or 3 locations, then he booked a flight, went there, looked at those 3, and was able to pick one. But it was a lot easier to do that than to spend, 2 weeks there driving around, getting a map, pulling it out, looking at it. I mean, even though you don't pull out a map anymore and look at it. But I mean, it allows location scouting. So, I mean, here's an example of, where you can just take it. So, I mean, that whole thing, figuring out the location, building it out, getting everything done, was done with me and myself, Matt McClurg, and Mars in like I think it was 3 days. Once we found the location, built it up, and then did the cameras and edited it and threw it in. So I mean, that gives you, I mean, and that's kind of a long time. I mean, there was the whole Techvis that was done as well, but I mean, that gives you an idea. I mean, it's just like, you try to go find a location and figure that out. You got to fly, drive, or whatever. It's weeks of time. So the last part that people are starting to utilize is, I mean, it's Mocap. I mean, you look at what XSense is doing, and the technology that, you don't need wires, you don't need cameras. It's all, sensor based on your body, and you could throw on a Mocap suit and quickly have live animation in Unreal. And now with what Epic's doing with the face capture and iPhones and stuff like that, it's really getting, top notch. And so, and again, eventually one day we'll get to a point where it's going to replace like Andy Serkis. But it's not. I mean, they're still going to need to, capture, a live performance and then render it and do all that. But for previs and figuring out story, I mean, James is doing it, did it correctly on Avatar. They're able to move around and he's able to see it live. But with Unreal, you just get even more of a feeling. I mean, on the first Avatar, it was a lot of gray shaded, models and stuff like that. I mean, moving now, it's going to just keep getting better. So, I mean, that's kind of where virtual production is, and that's where that's kind of what is happening. And then after they go and figure it out and they shoot it, there's a whole nother aspect that people don't realize, and that is Postvis. I mean, Postvis is kind of one of the most underrated parts of visualization because everyone thinks it's just like, oh, it's just previs, and then we go and get the cameras and then we're done. Yeah, but I mean, half the time you're dealing with blue screens and stuff like that. So when you get a film, you don't want to look at blue screens. You want to look at green screens. You want to be able to put in temp effects. But, while the giant studios like Weta and ILM and DD are fleshing out the look of it, they need to figure out a way to editorially which take works. So can we throw in slap comps and stuff like that? So Postvis is a huge contributor. And, I'm very fortunate to have partnered up with Michael Jackson, who has been a really well-respected Postvis artist in the industry for over about the same time, 20 years. And, a lot of this work represents his and eyes, what we've done throughout our career. I mean, so that kind of shows you the benefit of where Postvis comes in. I mean, a film, and at the very end, I'm going to show kind of just how important all three of these aspects are. But I mean, that just gives you an idea of what Postvis is. To show you even more a better representation, we have Greyhound, which just came out, and just a quick sense of before and afters. And you can see how much more interesting this film is, even though they shot the entire thing in a stage over green. Wouldn't be as impactful to figure out the story and stuff unless you had some temp effects. I mean, putting it in water, making sure that everything works, because editorially, this is the solution. So at this point, Postvis is really an editor's tool, and it's an opportunity for the editor to help direct how the visual effects are going to come in. Obviously, the director has a lot of say in it, but the editor is trying to figure out which performance is going to take and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's loose rotos, but at the same time, I mean, the thing that this also did, and that Mike and I were very fortunate with over our, my 10 years in visualization. Actually, let this finish and then I'll talk more. So, I mean, one thing that we did, which we were very fortunate with, was our Postvis was great. Surprisingly, oh, what? Yeah, no, I was on a thing. So our Postvis was at a quality level that the director and the editors were like, wow, that's Postvis. That's really good. That's actually, would you guys be up for doing a couple small effects final shots or green screen replacements or something like that? And what a lot of you guys may not know about, and that was the one thing when I was at school, is you always think of the big jobs that are out there, like animation and assets, and but there's a ton of other jobs that lend to our skill sets, pre-visualization, visualization, tracking, and another career or opportunity is basically every visual effects film, the editorial department hires someone called an in-house visual effects team. And it usually comprises of 2 or 3 artists. And they're just this like little elite, task force that just kind of, give us, hey, shit, we don't have the budget. ILM is quoting us this, or what is quoting us this. And, and they don't have the time or the manpower to do it. And it's a really stupid shot, but can you paint this out, or can you add effects here, or can you do this? And so we started to do more and more where we were being brought on after Postvis to kind of stick around and do some in-house finals. And we ended up doing a lot, on Kong. Mike and I ended up doing almost 1/3 of just secondary visual effects shots for the film. So I just wanted to show a quick example of what we were doing for in-house visual effects. So that's kind of just the gamut of kind of what visualization is and the different roles that there are and the different opportunities there are. It's a huge field, and before it was just previs and postvis, but now it's grown into an entire department. Visualization is its own thing now, where there's a lot of opportunities for every single artist, from assets to animation to texture artists to everything. So it is something to look into. But I do want to close on this. This basically is a completed Previz, Postvis, blue screen edit, and finals of a sequence in Alice. So I'm going to roll it off, and then we'll do Q&A. But first, this is the Previz.
Everything. And that is exactly what I will take from you. Everything! She took them. Revenge is mine! Next time. Hold on, Hatter!
So that was the Previz, and from that they went and did the shoot, and this is what they came back with. So this is untouched visual effects, just with any Previz that was straight Previz that will be all digital shots, or picture in picture to show what the Previz was. So as you can see, if you showed that to an audience just over blue, there's no context. There's no real information. It's pretty hard to understand what is happening. The Previz helps. One thing I forgot to add when we were just straight talking about Previz is that it's not just a director's tool, it's also a performer's tool. So actor, actress, because, if you tell an actor or actress, like, okay, there's a giant scorpion that's going to come and or a giant unicorn that's going to come and attack you, and it's angry. It's an angry, ugly, evil unicorn. Okay, as a performer, I'm like, no, unicorns are pretty. Like, look at it. Clowns are clowns, but it is freaky as F. But if the performer can look at Previz and be like, whoa, yeah, I see what it is, and I can see where, as opposed to just looking at a ball. So it is really a tool for them too when they're on set to kind of know like where eye lines are, what's happening. And so, you know, Mia, she loved it. She was very like, oh, let me see it again. Same thing with on Tomorrowland. George would always come back, and he made a joke at one point where he's like, okay, so you want me to do this, and you want me to like, you know, when the explosion comes, I can go like that, but I can act better than this, right? I mean, I don't have to do exactly what the previs is. I can perform better, right? And so it was kind of funny. But, you know, I mean, they enjoy being able to see it because they understand, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what the end goal is. So not only does it just save time, money, and that, but it's also a great tool for, you know, for the performers to know what they're doing. So now that you've seen the blue screen, here is it with the Postvis. So again, you can see where Postvis is a huge benefit to editors because I mean that tells so much more, and you can show that to an audience and get their feedback. I mean, they'll know it's temp effects and stuff like that. But if you show blue screen, they're going to be sitting there like, I don't know what's happening. You show that, they're going to be like, oh, that feels pretty good, or that still seems too long, or I don't think we need this in the film. That's another great thing about Previz, this whole thing is that you can figure out what works in the story, what doesn't, which then in the, back 20 years ago, they would go and shoot this stuff, then get in an editing room and then realize, well, we just wasted $1 million because that's crap. There's no need to have that in our film. And so that's that. But, once we do our, fun little visual effects and previs and postvis and, figure out the story, then we hand it off to the professionals and they make it look really pretty. And they make it what you see in. But again, like I was saying, I can actually say that I helped James and Andy figure out this part of the film. I mean, the whole film, but this sequence specifically. So there you have it. I am good. Thank you.
Very, very cool, Tefft. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really, really interesting thought bombs you dropped in terms of where things are going, which is very exciting. Seems like the future is extremely bright. We've got time for just a couple of questions from the questions that have come in, if you're good for that.
Yes.
One of the questions come in is, how do you get into Previz? And the person asking the question is, wondering, do I need to major in animation? If I'm training to be a 3D generalist, is that enough to kind of break in?
I mean, I think that at this point, because there are now departments in Previz and Postvis and everything that, if you have a specialty, you can actually still apply. I mean, if you're a generalist, the longevity of you staying on a show is going to be much greater because you can kind of do it all. I mean, when we were doing the stuff, at Halon and stuff like that, I mean, we would be able to model, rig, texture, camera, animate. I mean, there were better animators, there were better modelers. I mean, but in general, you kind of could do it all. But I think that if you have any type of certain skill in a certain department, I think that will lend to it. The biggest thing about Previz though is you have to be fast. I mean, that's the thing is like, so if it's taking, and one thing I noticed, like when I would go in and I would talk to students about, how long did it take you to animate something? One piece of advice I would give you is don't say it took you 5 weeks, because it didn't take you 5 weeks, because you're probably only working on it about an hour, 2 hours a week for that class. So do the math that way. So 5 weeks is 10 hours if you're doing 2 hours. So, when you have recruiters and stuff like that, don't ever say it takes that long on anything. Really try to figure out the time, and also, undercut it a little bit, and then it will always take you longer. But if you say it takes you longer, then you probably won't get hired. But don't completely lie. But I would say speed. Everything's going the game, so everything's low poly anyhow. So I think it's detail with keeping it with low poly count, and animation wise, just get a lot of the animators that I've been seeing coming out in general from whether it be Gnomon or other places. I mean, they're hitting it, but it's just the speed. You got to get faster, because I mean, like, that was one thing I haven't added is that, like, for a Previz artist, you're looking at per artist 2 to 3 shots a day of getting this stuff done. So you ideally want to get a sequence that is anywhere between 2 to 3 minutes. You want to have something, a rough cut, within a week. That's edited. That's 30 to 40 shots. You want to get a team of 4 to 5, and you kind of want to ideally go 2 to 3 shots a day. If you're at 1 to 2, that's fine. But if you're at 1 shot every 3 days, unless it's like a Marvel, sweeping camera around 70 characters, yeah, that's going to take you a minute. But you do have to try to figure out the speed of getting it done quicker.
Yeah. And we've got time for one last question here, kind of along similar lines, from Joe Bedwell. What's your advice for a junior artist trying to break into the industry, especially with COVID and a lot of places working remotely?
Well, the thing is, I mean, just make sure you have a machine. I mean, the nice thing right now is that, I mean, as crazy as it is that Hollywood is shut down, I can tell you that it's terrifying. It's been terrifying for the last, I mean, for myself, it's been terrifying since March, like, not having anything to work on, and studios are, starting to feel the pressure of it and letting people go. And I'm so sorry for those people. But at the same time, what has people been doing at home? They've been watching content. There's no more Netflix shows out right now because everyone's watched everything. You have no more movies to watch because you've watched them all. I mean, you've been sitting home you're watching TV. That's your choice. The one thing you've been gravitating to is like, more content, more content. Well, that's what's going on right now. So when this does open up, there's going to be tons of work, and there's going to be, other boutique studios like Opsis that are going to be opening up, and, bigger studios like DD and, Third Floor and Halon, and they're starting to gear up because they know that what's coming down the pipeline, and MPC, and, there's so many great studios out there right now. But the one thing I would say is that, reach out to them, reach out to, if you are a junior artist and you still have a connection with your school, talk to them, talk to your friends. I mean, that's the great thing about, I think, that our industry has, is that we really want to help each other out. We're never fighting each other for the job. Yes, we try to outbid people, but, at the end of the day, I think we all want people to, succeed in this career, and because we know it's hard, and there's a lot of work out there, and there's going to be a lot of work coming up. And so as a junior artist, I would say, have a good machine at home, because that's the other nice thing is that you can work now. You could work at a company in London. Really. You don't have to go to London anymore to work for a company in London. I can hire someone in Atlanta. I don't have to bring them to LA. I don't have to go to Atlanta. So there's going to be an opportunity for even more places to work, because you can work from home, and they are allowing it, where, MPAA is, taking off a little bit of the grasp of, like, NDAs and certificates and stuff like that. But at the same time, we all understand that, that this is happening, and they are, they're doing the things they need to do in order to allow people to work from home. And so, just reach out to studios, reach out to the right people. Do what I did. Ask the right questions. I didn't go in and say, give me a job. I went in and I said, hey, what do I need to do to work here? Or do you have a minute? As long as you're respectful and reach out, and and emails are great. I think voice to voice is better. If you can get someone on a phone, call them, because there's cadence and tone and stuff like that, and you can get a personal connection. And I think that really goes longer than just talent, because it's relationships.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Tefft, thank you so much for being with us tonight. This has
Thank
been
you.
amazing. Really just an incredible time, and pleasure to host you. I just want to say to our audience tonight, we'd love to see you back here on the Gnomon stream. I believe our next upcoming event will be the Art Jam that we do every Wednesday morning from 10 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, and that's with our Chief Creative Officer, Josh Herman, also an industry veteran, and he's been taking us through ZBrush quite a bit. So if you're looking for somebody that you can do some sculpting alongside, ask some questions to, and basically just have the opportunity to hang with an industry pro while they work on their stuff, that's our Art Jam, and that'll be this next Wednesday at 10 a.m. So I want to thank Miranda for production today, and yeah, Tefft.
One thing, sorry, I just want to add one thing just on the end of this, that I can't thank the studios that I've been with. I Look Effects, Gnomon, MPC, Halon, Pixamundo. I owe Zoic, Stardust. I would not have the success in this industry without their help and their support, and the work is a reflection of that. And I thank them for always allowing me to talk openly, and they are all amazing places, and hopefully one day someone will say that about Opsis. So here's to a wonderful future creating films.
Absolutely. Thank you. I look forward to seeing how you continue to develop things with Opsis as we move forward. So thank you again, and thank you to everybody who tuned in. Stay safe, stay creative, everyone, and we'll see you